Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from, without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what are this week's games?
Up first, in celebration of the series' long-awaited continuation, it's Capcom's action-packed 2005 apology tour, Devil May Cry 3.
Following that is 2010's Kirby's Epic Yarn, the return of Kirby platformers to home consoles after 10 years, doing so with a fluffy aesthetic and a piano-driven score. So good to be back with another week here of great soundtracks, 2 games in particular that are getting new versions or new ports this Friday. We like to kind of mix it in sometimes, but when it's 2 games like these, it's hard not to talk about them.
2 games that could not be further apart if we tried.
That's a very good point. One is very light and fluffy, but we're about to go on the dark and demonic side here.
Yeah, so let's talk about Devil May Cry 3. Now, this is going to be a weird one because this is my first time talking about a game that I haven't played. I've watched the whole game. I watched an LP of the entire game, but I'll get into reasons. I've tried it before and bounced off really hard when I was a teenager, and we'll get into why in a bit.
It's very interesting you say that. I also have watched the game, but not played it, so
yeah,
very interesting.
The original Devil May Cry was a game from Hideki Kamiya, who currently heads up Platinum and is responsible for a lot of their big releases there, but he started at Capcom. And he didn't continue on for Devil May Cry 2. Devil May Cry itself was a big success. It was originally supposed to be Resident Evil 4. It's one of the many, many prototypes that ended up different games that were supposed to be Resident Evil 4 before the Resident Evil 4 we know happened. But they figured that the game was too cool for them to not put together a full game for it. And so it was a big success. And then Kamiya left to go work on Resident Evil 0 and Beautiful Joe. Probably would have been the games that were in development during the development of Devil May Cry 2. And they decided, we are going to make it bigger. We're going to make it better. Everything about Devil May Cry 2 is going to be a complete improvement over Devil May Cry 1. And then it wasn't.
Nope.
They made the maps bigger. They made the game easier to a point where it was just trivial. The LP that I watched of Devil May Cry 3 starts out with a joke of them starting an LP of Devil May Cry 2. And they see the first enemy in the game, and they walk up to that enemy, and they just start shooting their gun. And within 15 seconds, the enemy is dead. It is up there as one of the most disappointing video game sequels of all time, 4 months before the game was done with development. The director, whom nobody knows who it was, Capcom has never said, they're not in the credits, nobody knows who was directing the game up until this point. They did such a bad job that they got removed from the project and apparently from history, and then Hideaki Itsuno came in to take over production. And according to him, he tried so hard to save Devil May Cry 2, but he just did not have enough time. And the game came out. It was panned by critics in pretty much every country. Devil May Cry fans hate it. A lot of them don't even bother playing it when going through the entire series. And people just don't like it. And Itsuno decided that no, I'm not going to let the series go down like that. I think it's a cool series, and I'm not letting it just fail on this awful, awful game. And so they started making Devil May Cry 3. The mission statement of Devil May Cry 3 was that they were going to go back to basics. They were going to sit down and forget the large levels, forget the more powerful guns, forget all that. We're going to just make this more in line with Devil May Cry 1, because that's the game everybody liked. And we're going to make it a prequel, so we don't have to deal with any of the story crap that came through in Devil May Cry 2. It also allows us to bring back Dante's twin brother Virgil. Ruben Langdon became the main actor for Dante at this point. He hadn't been in Devil May Cry 1 and 2. And apparently he's just responsible for the way Dante is now, for the Dante we know currently, because he did all of the motion capture for Dante as well. And they told him, we want a different spin on Dante that's not the cocky jerk that we created in DMC2. At first, he was trying to follow their suggestions, but apparently their suggestions were really confusing, and he couldn't actually tell what they were asking him to do. So eventually, Ruben Langdon just said, yeah, I'm just going to do my own thing, and I'm going to make Dante my own character.
And then the pizza scene happened.
The pizza scene. Whenever Patrick Boivin and Willie Madden of now of Castle Super Beast, they used to be of the Super Best Friends. When they talk about Dante, they like to describe him as the old man that's always just shouting, "Woo, yeah, pizza, woo," and not taking anything seriously. And that's all Ruben Langdon.
Yeah.
That was him 100%. Like I said before, I've tried Devil May Cry 3. When I was a teenager at my first job, I worked with somebody whom Devil May Cry 3 was their favorite game of all time. And they lent me their PS2 copy, and they were like, you gotta play this. It's super cool. You're gonna really like it. And I made it to the first mini-boss and couldn't beat him. I hit a wall so hard in Devil May Cry 3, and I found out that it's because our version was harder than Japan's. When the game came over here, our normal mode was their hard mode. And then it scaled up from there. And later they would release a special edition also on the PlayStation 2, and that fixed that. That put the difficulties back to the way they were supposed to be. I think that was generally considered not a very good idea, because, like me, a lot of people just bounced super hard off the game. But other than that, Devil May Cry 3 was a wild success. It is still generally considered the best game in the franchise. It's got some of the best characters. It introduced one of the greatest rival characters in video game history. And it kind of just cemented Itsuno into being the Devil May Cry guy, a spot where he still lives pretty much. He also, I believe, does Dragon's Dogma.
Yes. So that's the other game that a lot of people want him to go back and make Dragon's Dogma 2, so that when he comes out and say, we do Devil May Cry 5 for the fans, everyone's like, but you're gonna do Dragon's Dogma 2 after that, right? Yeah, no, Itsuno turned that series well around, and you're right. I think people see DMC3 as the best in the series, but it's hard, and a lot of times you'd think it'd be kind of vice versa, where like, oh, America gets it easier than Japan gets it, but oddly not for this one.
That's what you're used to hearing when it's like NES games, where it's like they made the NES, this version of this NES game, a lot easier because Americans are dumb and not good at video games. Take that, America.
Yeah.
Like, and this was the first example. And apparently there are other examples in this era of games getting harder when brought over to America. And I found that very, very interesting. So DM3 was a huge success. It led to the development of Devil May Cry 4, which is also considered great. And then Itsuno even went on to be a supervising producer or director on Ninja Theory's DMC Devil May Cry, which the less said about that game, the better.
Okay, look, people don't like that game. I still kind of like it. I mean, but then again, like I have a weird history with the series as well, where like I wasn't able to play most of the games, so I watched a lot of them, and so I beat DMC, Devil May Cry. So some things with the story were weird, but like I had a fun enough time with the action, and yeah, I knew enough of the stories. So when they added things like Virgil and all that, I found it somewhat interesting. Would I want to go back? No. Am I looking forward to buying Devil May Cry 5 and playing that? Yes.
So the main thing with that a lot of... I'm going to go back to Wooly and Pat a lot during this because I've watched DMC3 twice in my life. One was a long play with no commentary at all, and the other was them playing the game because they're huge fans of Devil May Cry. And they did a full LP of DMC, and that's how I watched that as well. And their whole thing was that they believe that if that game had been a completely different game, if it had not been called Devil May Cry, people would have loved it. Because it's still a good game. It still plays really well.
Yeah.
The story's a little bit heavy-handed and dumb, but like, whatever, it's fine. But because they, called it Devil May Cry, when people wanted DMC5, they wanted a continuation of the story they already knew, and they were getting this reboot that they didn't ask for. 2, the Dante in that game is a complete opposite of what Dante in the original Devil May Cry is supposed to be. Then when they made Dante in Devil May Cry 1, their goal was to make a cool guy hero who did not curse, did not smoke, and did not drink. And if you'll notice in Devil May Cry, Dante doesn't curse, drink, or smoke. So they succeeded for the most part, and Dante's a really cool main character, and in DMC, he does all 3 of those things.
And yeah, I know the whole mop on the head and forget about it, and
that's the third thing is that Ninja Theory made the weird decision to just be actively antagonistic towards the original Devil May Cry fans, which led a lot of people to be like, who is this game for then? Who are you making this for?
And so I guess that's the reason why I liked it okay enough, is because like I'm not steeped in the fandom and like live and die by the ranking system and the combat and all that. So with some of the stuff with Mundus, okay, that was a little weird. But yeah, I guess that's my weird, unpopular gaming opinion.
And I mean, from the sound of it, like a lot of people agree that the game is fine. It's just that it's because it's called Devil May Cry.
It's disrespectful, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that people just didn't enjoy that aspect. The music for Devil May Cry 3 was done by Tetsuya Shibata, who had been a long-standing member of the Capcom sound division. He was born in 1973 in Osaka, and his mom was a music teacher, which I'm starting to notice that's a trend with Japanese composers, is their parent is almost always, and usually their mom is almost always some form of music teacher.
It's a good inspiration.
This is like the 3rd or 4th Japanese composer that I've talked about that's that. But hey, that's a good start. So he learned how to play classical piano at a young age, and then he taught himself guitar, bass guitar, and drums during his teenage years, which is always impressive when somebody teaches themselves an instrument. My uncle taught himself guitar, and I'm never going to not consider that super impressive. And then he graduated from college. He went to Kansai University in 1996 with a law degree, which, again, never feel ashamed, artists, for getting a backup degree.
Just in case. It's a tough biz.
That doesn't mean you're any less of an artist. That means you are a smart artist who has a thing to fall back on.
Yeah.
But he also took music classes while he was there. Just outside of his major, he talked about a lot of classical music classes, a lot of rock, a lot of jazz. He got into jazz a lot. And then eventually just bought a synthesizer and started composing his own music and decided, I don't want to go into law. I want to write music. And he wanted to write music for anything. Anything. Didn't matter what it was. So he sent a bunch of stuff all over the place, and he said he got a couple of jobs here and there, but he didn't get anything solid. And then some family members introduced him to Capcom and the video game music industry in general. And he joined Capcom in 1997. He says that Devil May Cry 3 is his favorite and most challenging project. He actually does not work at Capcom anymore. He left it in 2009 to form his own company called Unique Note, which just sort of, from the sound of it, exists to do what he originally planned to do, which is they'll write music for anything. They'll write for whatever needs it. They've written for video games. They've written for stage musicals. They advertise their services as being available for commercials, all sorts of stuff. He formed that company alongside Yoshino Aoki, who was also a former Capcom composer. And he cites his inspirations as ranging from Chopin to British pop, which the two groups he listed I had never heard of, so that's interesting. To Aerosmith, to various jazz musicians, again, most of which I've never heard of, but that's not super surprising. I'm not super into the jazz scene. His first games were working with the Darkstalkers franchise, and then eventually he would contribute to the soundtracks of games like Street Fighter Alpha 3, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and he also was the sole composer for both of the Power Stone games.
MVC2, if you've never heard that soundtrack, is really cool.
Oh, yeah.
It's like really different than anything you'll hear with its acid jazz. I love it.
He was the composer for Devil May Cry 2, 3, and 4, but he is not on for 5, obviously, because he left Capcom. He also has contributed, through his company Unique Note, he's contributed to games like Half Minute Hero, and he also contributed a bit to Final Fantasy 15.
Nice.
And he has been a member of the composing team for both Smash Wii U and Smash 3DS, as well as Smash Ultimate, where he was responsible for the Lost Painting remix from Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
Oh, that's a good one.
He was also the sound director for Monster Hunter Tri and Resident Evil 5. Resident Evil 5 is the one that he is most known for being the sound director for, not the composer, mind you. He didn't do the music, he just did the sound.
Different role, yep.
And while he was not the sound director or really involved all that much with the game, he is considered to be pretty much responsible for the inclusion of licensed music on the soundtrack of Dead Rising. So there's not a lot of information on the actual music of this game. It's unfortunately, it has the worst of both worlds. It is a Japanese composer who seems to keep to himself a good bit, and also a niche game. Devil May Cry is a niche franchise for sure. So it was very difficult to actually find interviews or anything like that describing exactly what the idea behind the music was. I did manage to find one where he talked about how he believes that the composer should experience the entirety of the story before starting to compose for the game. Which is very in line with last week we talked about Danny Baranowski, who said something similar, where he was like, you should play without music because then you'll get a feel for everything that can happen and you can work the music around that. And I found that very interesting that those two sort of had very similar outlooks on making music for games.
And it's slightly different, where you kind of have to, know the narrative arc, and especially if you're writing character themes. I mean, you can use certain elements, foreshadowing, that could certainly help. Instead of just, going in blind and, what comes, what may.
He claims that he believes that writing for video games is very parallel to working on music for movies. It's just that games are on a grander scale because they need more, and they need more variety because they need to work in a bunch of very different situations. He composed 140 pieces of music for Devil May Cry 3.
Yeah, if you look at the soundtrack, I mean, there are battle themes, and even on the soundtrack, there's the score for story events and the cutscenes. So it's it's like almost you're scoring the whole game.
Oh yeah, he went hard on this game. And so the past two Devil May Cry games had more of an electronic feel, and this one still does, but he wanted to replace some of the electronic feel with vocals, which was something that the other games hadn't really approached. Because he felt that vocals were just a little more strong than a synth. And he's right. He doesn't talk about why he decided on metal vocals specifically. I assume it's just demons metal. I mean, there's a connection there. It fits.
Hey, it works. And it's makes certain songs it's definitely this game, as opposed to any other in the series.
Yeah.
Though I guess, if you think about it, Devil May Cry 4 with its battle theme kind of carried over something similar with The Time Has Come.
And then, of course, DMC5's got Devil Trigger.
Yeah, for sure.
Which might have been a different composer, but it continued that trend super hard.
Different vocal style for sure, but it's a good trend to continue, especially with DMC5, and maybe it's a future episode we talk about it, but it's like, it's bringing the whole kind of thing where we'll see in games like Metal Gear Rising, Revengeance, where it's like, if you do okay, like you have a basic instrumental, but the better you do, more instruments are added, and then you get to the higher levels and vocals kick in. So, yeah.
Which is an extremely cool system for a game like this, where the better you do in fights and the more varied your moves are, the higher your style ranking goes, which is what decides how like cool the music gets. And I believe they're actually legitimately taking the technology from Rising in DMC5. I believe it's the same sort of audio interface. I think they said they were borrowing that from Platinum.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. It's a really, really cool thing. But maybe we'll talk about that Metal Gear Rising thing in a future episode.
Wink. So let's get to the 5 critical tracks. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you guys. People are going to be a little bit mad at me. I do think that this is a good soundtrack overall. But I also think that it's a lot better. This is one of those that's a lot better in context behind the game.
Yeah.
Going to listen to it outside of the context of the game. People might disagree with me. I don't know. It's just a little bit hard to do so. But nevertheless, there are some real good standouts.
I think you have a good 5 here, though. It's a strong list. I think it's a good one.
Well, our first one is Cerberus Battle. And this is the main theme for the first boss in the game, which is Cerberus, as would probably be figured. And it's weirdly subdued, but it still feels tense, and Shibata really wanted to include like vocals to sort of highlight and make the tracks a little more memorable, and this is the first time I think that you really, really hear that in the game itself. For the people that really, really like Devil May Cry 3, this is the first point where they start to realize that, oh yeah, no, this is a good game. Because Devil May Cry lives and dies on its boss fights, 100%. They're all so cool, and they also, for anybody that does not know, the big thing about the boss fights is that when you beat one, you get a weapon. That boss becomes your weapon, and you gain some of their abilities. And so the boss fights work as a preview of the ability you're going to get when you beat them. The vocals are just really cool. They feel sinister, and it makes this boss pretty memorable overall.
It definitely fits the vibe of the song. The song gets that kind of low guitar groove. And you're right. I think it is a little more subdued for a first boss, but it has it kind of like a building intensity to it.
Oh yeah.
It's definitely a good one to have like on a continuous loop. Like I could listen to 30 minutes of this easy.
Next up we have Nevin Battle. Now, Nevin I half include because I think it's actually like a really, really good song. Mm-hmm. It's another kind of subdued boss fight theme, and this one doesn't include any vocals, at least as far as I remember and as far as I've listened to it multiple times the past few days.
The vocals are more from the boss battle itself.
Yeah, pretty much. If you've never seen this boss fight, it's a fight with like a vampire lady.
Succubus, like, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the most unique boss fights in the game, and it also provides you with the most unique weapon in the entire game, possibly the most unique weapon in all of character action, because it's a guitar. She gives you an electric guitar that shoots bats. It's weird and also really cool, and just the atmosphere of that fight. And like you said, this song doesn't really involve vocals a lot because all of the vocals come from the boss talking to you and making some really she's a succubus. You can assume what she's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Just during the whole fight. I don't know, something about this song really grabs me. It might just be its relation to the boss fight itself, because I think that boss fight's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
That really helps it grab me, but I think that this is a really cool song overall.
You've got it in your notes here, but I think it's a good point. The similarities, at least in like the main rhythm and groove, the similarities to Lock and Load, the main battle theme from the first Devil May Cry, which is probably the best song on that soundtrack. I think it's a pretty apt comparison to make.
I'm glad somebody else hears that, because I was almost positive I was just crazy and hearing things. It's the drums, I think. The drums mostly do it for me.
Yeah.
That's good. Thank you for lowering my fears on that point. Next up is Confiding Lady. Because it doesn't always have to be action slashy cool drum fast paced go time. Sometimes you gotta have an emotional moment, and this is probably the best emotional scene in the game of Dante talking to the character Lady, who her dad is the main antagonist of the game, and Dante's gotta go kill him. And she is pretty much ready for that because she originally goes to kill him herself. That's why she's there. But it's still like a very sad scene of learning some of Lady's backstory, and Dante saying like, all right, I get it. This is serious. I have to take this serious. I need to do something. I'm going to take care of it. Don't worry.
Lady's one of my favorite characters in this franchise. So I'm glad you included this one, because yeah, you're right. It's not all action, go, yeah, pizza, rock all the time. But especially when Shibata's trying to, write for a wider range of cinematic moments and write for more than just video games, right? He kind of has to get to the emotional core of what's going on. And yeah, sometimes you got to dip into that piano.
And I agree that Lady is up there as one of my favorite characters in the franchise as well. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with her in 5, because I believe she's showing up, I think.
Yep, I've seen a render of her character. So, I mean, her, Trish, they'll all be back. There's that whole possible multiplayer thing they're playing up. So, yeah, I'm sure they'll try to bring as many characters in as possible.
And I look forward to hearing about her some more. She barely shows up in DMC 4, so.
Right.
After that, you have Virtual Battle 2. Because it's the best version of the Virtual Battle.
Hell yeah, it is. It's the coolest.
So the third battle is arguably a cooler fight in-game. The second battle has the best music.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. It's like, okay, yeah, I guess the third battle, it's the climax of the story. Okay, sure. But it kind of settles for more of like an orchestral, trying to be epic thing.
It's got a more emotional sort of feel to it.
This one is in your face. I'm gonna get you, bro.
The third fight is supposed to be like the emotional climax. It is two brothers fighting because their ideals are just clashing too much and there's no way to talk through it. Meanwhile, the second fight is just I'm gonna get you, Virgil. Bring it on, Dante. And this fits that a lot more. It's just a fight between two brothers, one of whom isn't actually taking this all that seriously.
I have memories of this playing like in my car through the stereo system and just like losing myself in the music that like, oh no, I am going way too fast because like this music just gets you amped up, and like it's up there like as probably one of my favorite songs of like that entire generation of music, generation of consoles, like very high on my list. So I'm very, very glad that it's on this 5.
Of course, this song would later go on to be the main theme, the theme of Virgil in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 2, which is fitting. There are 3 DMC characters in Marvel vs. Capcom, and of them, 2 of them have music from this game.
And it's a really good remix in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, UMVC 3. But like there's something about like the raw instruments and like the midiness of this version. Like, yeah, they're both great. They're both fine. But there's something about how the beat drives in this one that I like more.
And just it helps that the fight itself is super cool. Devil May Cry has this. I'm lukewarm on it because I think in DMC 3 it's a little less mocking. In 1 it's absolutely mocking, but you can unlock an easy mode in Devil May Cry by losing a lot. Like if you lose way too much, you'll unlock easy mode. And my favorite part of the Willie and Pat LP of this game was that they unlocked it during this fight. And just mid-sentence he's saying like, "Oh man, well that's over," and they just blew out their microphones. and the one not playing just started laughing and just dying. It was such a good moment. And it made me warm up a little bit on that sort of mechanic. I'm not a big fan of when games are like, "What, you're going to go play easy mode now like a baby?"
Yeah.
I want to see the game.
Right. Yeah, sometimes we're adults. We don't have all the time to try again and again and again.
Yeah.
A different topic for a different time.
And lastly, we've got what is arguably the most famous song from Devil May Cry 3. In fact, I don't even know why I said arguably. It's the most famous song from Devil May Cry 3. Devils Never Cry, the staff roll.
Undoubtedly had to have this one.
Oh yeah, again, this is another one of the themes that would come back from Marvel vs. Capcom being Dante's theme, but this is just this really cool sounding song, and it needs to sound like actiony, because later on it does become very actiony, because the way Devil May Cry does its credits is you're in a fight during its credits.
Yeah.
You're just in an endless arena fight that you're trying to beat as many enemies as you can, and I believe in 3 specifically, if you beat 100 enemies during this sequence, then you get like the true ending or something.
Huh.
But I'm not 100% on what you get. I know you get something if you kill 100 enemies. This is, I think, the most notable use of metal vocals, obviously, for obvious reasons. And also, nobody at Capcom knows how the word C is pronounced. Nobody.
I might as well share the story of how I guess broke your mind, especially when we talk about Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and that soundtrack. And yeah, you're right. It's Dante's theme with a version of Devils Never Cry. And so I'm listening to this song, and that version in particular, and it kind of is the same in the original Devil May Cry 3, but with the vocals, I'm trying to remember what the actual lyrics are. It's like the arc inside, or
so originally I thought it was like the arcane sign. It is the eyes can see.
No fuck.
That is what it's,
no, I'm sorry,
that is
no
what
way.
it's supposed
no
to say.
way.
That's what it's supposed to be saying. I swear. I promise. That's what it is.
So, so I've always heard it, especially in the Marvel vs. Capcom 3 version, as it's the Arkansas.
Yeah.
As like the state. And so I told you this one time years ago, and you're just like, I can never unhear that.
I could never unhear that. And even to this day, even knowing what it's supposed to say, I can't unhear. Because I can't hear what it's supposed to say. That's not how the word "see" is pronounced. That's not real.
It's not the eyes can see. Shut up, man.
That's what they are. That's what the lyrics are. I swear.
Oh my god.
It's so dumb. And that's something I could say about a lot of this game's soundtrack, and a lot of the fan base sort of has the same feelings, is that, especially with these metal vocals and stuff, they're cheesy, they're dumb, but like they lean into it. They lean into how dumb it is.
Yeah.
And I love that. I think that's why it works.
Yeah, you're right. It creates a style all its own. It's something we remember, even if it's for the totally wrong lyrics. But no, it's definitely a memorable ending for sure.
But in conclusion, on the cutting room floor, I don't have anything on the cutting room floor. Sorry, guys.
I have one.
Oh, thank you. You saved me.
Cool. I'll put Arkham Battle 2 in there. So, like, this is the second half of that boss battle. It's, like, right before the Virgil final battle. But it's, like, a really tedious slog. But it's Dante and Virgil teaming up. And it gives me, like, a similar sort of epic vibe as Virgil Battle 2. So, like, that's kind of why I, like, kind of resonate a little bit with it. Still, like, don't get me wrong. I mean, Virgil Battle 2 is, like, the best. My favorite from this one. Devils Never Cry is one you gotta put on here. But I have a soft spot for Arkham Battle 2, so I wanted to give it a little mention in there.
Fun fact about that fight, by the way. Did you know that I don't believe this is mentioned in like the manuals or anything. It was supposed to be a secret for people to find. If you plug a second controller in during that fight, player 2 can play as Virgil.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's really, really cool.
Yeah.
So just a fun fact for those of you kids, if you go back and play Devil May Cry at some point, Devil May Cry 3. Like, Virgil has his own play style and everything. Because you can play the whole game as Virgil. You can unlock Virgil as a playable character. Mm-hmm. And he plays completely differently from Dante. He doesn't have guns or anything like that. It's really cool. What will I never forget about Devil May Cry 3? Virgil.
Yeah.
Virgil. Virgil is one of the best rival characters that video games has ever seen. Ever. He's like the polar opposite of Dante. His attacks all look super cool. He's just such a cool character, and he's the main takeaway, I think, for a lot of people. There's a reason why that's the character that has come back so many times for like bonus stuff.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's definitely Virgil. I mean, I like Lady a whole lot, but like the story on its face in this game, with Arkham and opening up the demon realm, like, it's not much to write home about, but it's absolutely all about the brother rivalry. And Virgil's such a cool character. His inclusion in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 was a perfect fitting translation. So yeah, I think that's what I can't forget. And it's that second battle song. I love it so much.
It's a very cool game that maybe one day I'll go back and try again. I hope to, but probably not anytime soon. I'm not good at games. My fingers, they can't do the thing. I'm going to try DMC5.
Yeah, same. And like I was going to say, until then, we'll see what Virgil's role is in this game. Is it like what the trailer suggests? Did he take Nero's arm? Is that him? We'll have to see.
Who knows? It probably is, though.
Yeah.
So for the transition, we usually like to highlight a fan remix. And this one wasn't hard to find. When you have an option to put Little V Mills in something, you put Little V Mills in something. So he did an epic metal cover of Devils Never Cry. It's super cool. So enjoy that.
And now, for something totally different, we're going to talk about one of the easiest games you can play, about fuzzy yarn characters and the struggles to collect jewels.
Oh, I didn't even think of that part. Epic Yarn is like the opposite in every way.
Every possible way. But, you know, its port to a portable system is also this Friday on the same day as Devil May Cry 5 coming out. So, had to talk about Kirby's Epic Yarn. And, man, this is an interesting one. I think I've probably had the most fun researching this one so far, because it uncovered a whole side of development and just overall soundtrack construction that I'd never heard of before. So I'm looking forward to sharing this with all of you. Kirby's Epic Yarn was developed by Goodfeel, as well as HAL Laboratory, HAL Laboratory, back in the day, Masahiro Sakurai, creator of Kirby, along with Satoru Iwata. Like, HAL was the original kind of Kirby team, but Goodfeel was the main development team and thrusting behind working on this game. Of course, it is published by Nintendo. A previous Goodfeel title, like the first one that Goodfeel worked on with Nintendo, was Wario Land Shake It, also on the Nintendo Wii. And of course, after that, Goodfeel went and did Yoshi's Woolly World, which, you know, going from the Yarn Kirby to the Yarn Yoshi, is kind of like the spiritual successor to it in a way, even though it was, 5 years after the fact. So Kirby's Epic Yarn was released on October 17th, 2010 in the United States, of course, on Nintendo Wii. Previous Kirby games on consoles where you had Kirby 64, The Crystal Shards was the last platformer.
Woo!
Before Epic Yarn. That was in 2000 on N64.
Still the best Kirby game.
It's a good one. And then Kirby Air Ride was totally different racing game, 2003 on GameCube. So Wikipedia kind of had a summary of what the gist of the game is. It says, the game follows Kirby, who has been transformed into yarn and sent to Patchland, a world made completely out of fabric. He must help Prince Fluff by collecting 7 pieces of magic yarn that are used to stitch Patchland back together in order to stop the game's antagonist, Yin Yarn. Those who have played it remember the magic sock that Kirby... you did it! You got the magic sock! The game is fundamentally a platformer, where you're jumping to different platforms, and you're engaging with your environment and enemies, not by sucking enemies up like you would in previous Kirby games, but instead using a string of yarn that comes off your body to either lasso, pieces in your environment, or lasso enemies, kind of put them into a ball of yarn that you can throw, maybe at other enemies, maybe at things in the environment. You'd eventually get certain transformations because yarn can do so many things. So Kirby can transform at certain parts in a level, whether it's to traverse a big, environment hazard or just to beat up a lot of enemies. But that's all kind of at set scripted points in the game. As I mentioned at the top of this, the game is notoriously very easy.
Can you even die in Kirby's Epic Yarn?
No. There is no defeat condition in Kirby's Epic Yarn because how it measures your success is these jewels, crystals that you collect. And so if you get hit, oh well, you lose jewels, you can pick up most of them again. It's almost like rings for Sonic, but I mean, what if you get hit with 0, like you just get hit? Oh no, you fall into a pit. Oh no, you come back and the jewels just kind of fall.
It's like a weird yarn balloon, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. It kind of has like an sort of umbrella thing to it. There's a big co-op component to this game, where your player 2 can play as Prince Fluff, who's this blue ball, and he has a little crown to note that he's a prince. But what I learned about this game, which I found very interesting, was this wasn't a Kirby game to begin with. Goodfield developed this game as under the working title of Keto no Fluff, which is a title that was starring Prince Fluff as the primary protagonist, where he would go on a journey to find his lost mother. Less than a year before the game came out, they kind of got the word. It's like, hey, we're going to make this a Kirby game. And HAL Laboratory is going to come in and kind of make it so that it's a Kirby game and help you with certain things.
That seems really late to do that.
Yes. Yes, it was. And so, this game was revealed at E3 2010, which was the year that I happened to go to the show. It was my first time ever going to E3. So I remember seeing this game revealed live at the conference, like in that arena, and then going on the show floor and playing this game. So like I kind of have an odd personal connection to it. And so I always just thought, yeah, Prince Fluff, he's just the player too. No. This game was originally all about Prince Fluff, and then they're like, maybe it should be Kirby. Like at a very late time, oddly enough. Go figure. The game was received rather well on its release, with about an 86 on Metacritic. And as I mentioned, Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn launches this Friday on Nintendo 3DS. Has additional abilities, a new devilish mode, which adds that death condition in there.
Devil May Cry!
We
found the connection!
It's all linked together. And then there are also some new mini games as well. So the composing history of the game is really interesting because the composer named Tomoya Tomita is the primary composer on this game. So Tomoya Tomita worked on the large bulk of this game. But you have also Hirokazu Ando, Jun Ishikawa, and Tadashi Ikegami, who are from HAL Laboratory, who came in at that very short notice and added some elements into the game's soundtrack. So let's primarily then learn about Tomita today. Tomoya Tomita, born on January 1st, 1963, in Suzuka in the Mie Prefecture in Japan. Also self-taught as a musician. So he was self-taught on guitar at age 13, drums at 16. He played in a band as a student where he primarily played the drums, but also sometimes guitar. And his first kind of exposure with creating his own music and composing was on a synthesizer. And again, all self-taught. So when he was looking for a job in the kind of game music or just music composition industry, he noticed in a music magazine that Konami had placed an ad saying that they were looking for people to join their sound staff. And he applied and he got the job. And in interviews, he considers himself very lucky that that opportunity came around and it got his foot in the door. He worked on several projects, one of them even being Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, where he was part of a team of composers there. So he worked on some of those games, moved to NES games, and he had several projects along the way at Konami after he started at that company in 1988. But eventually, and it kind of rings true today for Konami, he said the working environment was the worst.
Yeah, that sounds in line with what we've heard about working at Konami in general.
Mm-hmm. Said it is like very oppressive, and there were certain game projects where like he was hardly going home at all. So within the last 5 years of when he was at Konami, he wasn't even on the sound team anymore. So he decided to go to a company that was started by some of his colleagues. He worked on the Goemon games. So he went with some colleagues who started this company called Goodfeel. And he joined Goodfeel in 2005. And he said he had a lot more freedom there. Not surprising, but he could kind of do things his own way. Eventually in 2017, he would move on to be a freelance composer, and he'd be opening to work with Goodfeel again. It wasn't on bad terms or anything like that. It's just he decided to move on and be a freelance composer. He has his own YouTube channel, which I found very interesting. So kind of posts his own work here on the side, here and there. That was really interesting. Tomita's creative process, I found interesting how he kind of laid it out. He said, first I will try to understand the project. Then I will check the artwork of the character and the background. I imagine what kind of sound is ringing there. So he kind of imagines it in his head. And then he'll make a prototype of music and sound effect and discuss the direction of the sound with the director. Because at Konami, he had some composition experience, but he was mostly like on the sound design team and the sound director role. So, like Shibata, like a lot of, the sounds and everything involved, just the overall aural experience. But he points out that he says, I'm not very good at reading and writing sheet music. So he programs everything, at the time, he said directly into KIRBY'S, which is like a synthesizer program on the computer. A lot of MIDI work and things like that. So I just found it really interesting that being self-taught still doesn't really get the whole sheet music thing. But he has that kind of, not necessarily vision would be the right word, but the sense in his head of what the music should sound like. And then he can translate that to, the computer program to make it sound how he wants it to. After moving to Goodfeel, he got to work on as the primary composer for Wario Land Shake It, their first big project as kind of partnering with Nintendo. And so he said there's a lot of pressure because, working with Nintendo and a character like Wario, but also because he had been a while since he had composed. So he wasn't as confident, but it, turned into a really good success. Like that's one of the big underrated games on Wii for sure. So Tomita's discography, when he's in the sound design role, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, The Manhattan Project on NES, Ganbare Goemon 2 and 3 in particular, and Castlevania Dracula X, which I found interesting that he was on that, especially with, Richter and things like that for Smash Brothers, just kind of like a recent sort of infusion there.
I just played Rondo of Blood like a couple weeks ago, which Dracula X is a port of? Not really, but kind of.
Yeah.
So that is quite interesting.
Whether he was either the sound director or producer, it was Mystical Ninja starring Goemon, Castlevania for Nintendo 64.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, right is right. Castlevania Legacy of Darkness and Circle of the Moon. For composing credits, mentioned Metal Gear 2, Solid Snake is one of the many on that team. Wario Land Shake It, of course, obviously Kirby's Epic Yarn. We Play Motion, Miiforce, and then Yoshi's Woolly World, as well as the 3DS carryover of Poochie and Yoshi's Woolly World. So the whole idea of Goodfeel working on the game and then Hal stepping in at like the last minute to help also, not a surprise, applies to the kind of history of Kirby's Epic Yarn's soundtrack. But it kind of begins with the game director Madoka Yamauchi explaining that she wanted to create a game that little kids could play with their mothers. So instead of Tomita envisioning game music that he had to write, he wanted to write music that would be more suitable for a picture book, which I think is fitting considering the style and aesthetic in Kirby's Epic Yarn.
That is a very good approach to that sort of thing, I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm. When you hear that soundtrack, and we'll hear some of the critical tracks here soon, there's definitely a heavy piano influence in the game. And he said he chose piano specifically because of, the simpler kind of soundtrack for a kid's book, but also the piano has a range of tones and dynamics. But here's the thing, Tomita wasn't really a piano player. So he said he researched many styles, he practiced a lot, but of course using computer programs and MIDI meant there wasn't really a pressure to perform live, and he could kind of program and construct things. I mean, he certainly had to learn kind of how to play it to get the basic rhythm in there, but not everything had to be done at once. That would probably have been too overwhelming. So programming things certainly helped in that regard for him. When the idea was originally constructed that Prince Fluff was the protagonist, that's a new character. Tomita felt very free to kind of create whatever music he wanted to. He wasn't confined to any sort of constraints like he was previously with Wario, where Wario is this set character and he has certain tunes that he can arrange to fit those classic songs, right? So he had the freedom with Prince Fluff, but then Hal enters the picture when Nintendo's like, it should be a Kirby game. We want it to be a Kirby game now. So there were 7 worlds. There are 8 total, but 7 of the worlds that Tomita did like the stage music for. And he said it was when 6 of the 7 worlds that he wrote, like were all done essentially. And then Hal enters the picture and it's decided that, okay, the last world we'll make with like Kirby songs. And so like the people at Hal and Tomita kind of met to decide like, how can we take the style of soundtrack that's been kind of generated so far and match it to these classic Kirby songs? I mean, there's a battle with Meta Knight, and there's Butter Building, and there's Halberd and DDD's theme. Certain classic songs that it's like, how can we get it to translate? So there was some work to make it fit that style. But fortunately for Tomita, like the people at HAL liked what they had heard so far. So it's not like Tomita's work had to be scrapped. I mean, he was able to continue and finish it on time. But it's just really interesting to hear, because I always thought it was just like a Kirby game from the ground up, but to hear that like, nope, HAL came in at the last minute and this is why the last world is Dream World. And to hear that, it's just, it puts a whole different spin on the game for me, to be honest.
And that's another connection we have between these two games, is that, like I said, the original Devil May Cry was supposed to be a Resident Evil game, and then it was changed to be a different game on its own. And it's always really interesting when that happens to games, especially when it's stuff like, because this isn't the only time Nintendo's pulled that. Like, think of Star Fox Adventures, where they went in and were like, oh man, this dinosaur planet thing's pretty cool. What if you put Star Fox in it?
Right, yeah.
So it's always really interesting when that happens, I think.
So Tomita mentioned like some of his favorite songs from this soundtrack. Not ones that I picked for the Critical 5 here. I mean, there's still good ones, but I still wanted to highlight, he said he would pick Rainbow Falls. Which is basically level 1-3. And also Big Bean Vine. Which is level 1-4. Both good songs, certainly. But I wanted to talk about what I would say are the 5 critical tracks in this game. We'll start with, I mean, you have like the Patch Castle, which is kind of like the home base where you can put certain things and customize. Like that could be, I guess, the first level. But the first level, the first stage in the game is Fountain Gardens. And so the story and the game, the title, kind of opens up with this piano little riff it's called Flower Fields. Like title screen and everything. It's one of the, I guess, classic songs, but it's a little slower here. What Fountain Gardens does is it takes that riff, plays it a little faster at the beginning, but then blows it out into like this big orchestral arrangement. And it's a really cool song that like everyone who's played this game like knows this song.
This song was the one used in the Extra Epic Yarn trailer, wasn't it?
Yeah. So like it's probably one of the most iconic songs through the whole game. It gives you a whole lot of nostalgia going back to it if you've played Kirby's Epic Yarn. So this is also the level where they're kind of introducing you to how Kirby can transform in new ways. So this is the first appearance of the Tank Bot, which is quite the transformation. It really blows out that original Flower Fields piano riff. Just a full orchestration. Still MIDI based, but still really good. I like it a whole lot.
This game makes very good use of its MIDI sort of backgrounds, especially in a world where like a lot of other Wii games were using orchestras.
Mm-hmm.
Like think of like Mario Galaxy and Galaxy 2 used an orchestra, or you've got, I mean, not all the time, but they use an orchestra for most of the songs.
Yeah.
And you've got like Skyward Sword and stuff like that. And then this game just unapologetically uses MIDIs and uses them very well, because that's also extremely hard, by the way.
Yes, absolutely. Got to find the good instruments, and Tomita is definitely saying like he found like really good plugins that helped make it sound a whole lot better. So it definitely helps. My second critical track, we're going to go with Dusk Dunes. So this is the last stage in the third world, and it's also like a bonus stage. You're transformed into this off-roader form, and so you're kind of dune buggying all these hills and whatnot. It's an interesting level, but I think the piece itself is really catchy, where it's a jazz piano. It's got this syncopated rhythm, kind of using offbeats a whole lot. And just these simple chords, and the drums really keep the beat going. It keeps pushing it forward because you're in this vehicle. Kirby's this vehicle form, and you gotta keep going, keep driving. But it's just a really catchy, fun sort of song.
I mean, you know me, I'm a sucker for piano pieces, especially like ones like this where it's more jazzy. So this song's right up my alley.
I mean, this whole soundtrack is up your alley. What can I say? It's a really good one. So next song, let's go Cool Cave. This is in World 3-3. This one's just really cozy, really soothing. And there are certainly tracks that have this sort of feel, and it's really easy to do with piano, right? Eventually there are some chords later in the piece that kind of build in this sort of sense of danger, because the third world is like Hotland, essentially. Like it's a really dangerous volcanic overworld. At this level, you're in a cave. Everything's nice and chill, and it's really cool.
I was about to say, would you say it's chill?
Yeah. So it's like basically a reprieve from the dangers of the overworld. So it's really fitting for its environment. as soon as it starts, though, like, you just know, like, all right, this is kind of a little bit of a downtime. But we got some boss battles here for the last couple. So let's start with our fourth critical track versus Fangora. This one kind of reminds me a little bit, I just thought of it, of like the Hooktail boss battle, like the first one in Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. Because you're against a dragon.
I could see that.
It's a totally different sort of kind of game, but it just, kind of first big boss battle against a dragon. This one, it's piano to start. The drum kind of keeps the pace because you gotta have a little extra energy for a boss battle. But it eventually really expands the instrument set. I mean, into bass and brass and just all sorts of instruments here. But it's got a good sort of pace and feel to it for this one. It's just one I always remember. When I think of the soundtrack, I think this is just one of the more notable ones from it.
I do like that for the most part, the song doesn't sound like... It's not sinister like you would expect a boss fight to be.
Yeah,
it doesn't sound evil. There are points where it goes into a minor sort of tone, but it's still fun. It's very lighthearted. It's very just like, oh yeah, we're fighting a dragon in this picture book for children, and it fits super well. That's obviously what he was going for, and he nailed it. I think so.
And it's like, aren't you glad it's not wispy yet?
Give it time.
That's a fun one. But I think the best, and I don't really want to say it, like, I think my favorite song on this one is not one that Tomita did. It's when the team at HAL came in and they put their musical spin on the final boss of the game for Yin Yarn. It's versus Yin Yarn. And like, this is a Kirby boss, like a Kirby boss theme through and through, with the intensity that you'd expect and the different sort of use of synth instrument to kind of play with it in different ways for that frenetic pace. And this is just part one. Part two of the battle, it's just like, it's a little much to me, to be honest. But this one like really gets the gist of like the frenetic nature, the tones of the battle, but it is so totally different than all of Tomita's work, which is just, it's all fantastic. But I think we have to recognize, with HAL coming in, like, they did a really bang up job. It wasn't just like a remix of a past Kirby song. Like, this is a new one for that boss.
There are a lot of elements from Kirby 64's boss theme in this song.
Oh, yeah?
Almost entirely. It's not a full-on remix, but this is very, 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 very close to Kirby 64's boss theme.
Interesting. I mean, which makes sense. If you're coming in, like, you can't be doing, full songs from scratch. So I guess that makes sense. And I'm not as well-versed in Kirby 64, so
That's the only Kirby game I'm well-versed in.
But I'm pretty sure that Jun Ishikawa worked on Kirby Superstar. And so, like, that's why it just feels like a Kirby, boss through and through. So it was worth mentioning there.
It's a very, very good song.
Tracks on the cutting room floor. I got to give a shout out to Snowy Fields. which is in level 6-1. Tomita says that he loves snow, and he felt like writing a really good Christmassy kind of piece. He said in an interview, oddly enough, he wrote this song on December 25th.
Hey.
And man, if this isn't like one of, like Free CZ Peak, a lot of people think is like from Banjo-Kazooie, is just like, that's the winter level, that's the winter song. This is up there as like prime holiday snow falling winter songs.
I'd agree with that.
And then I also wanted to mention, talking about taking a classic Kirby song and putting this sort of piano spin on it, Butter Building.
Always down for a good remix of Butter Building.
It's probably one of the best in the game, and Butter Building is one of the better Kirby songs. This one, credit to Hirokazu Ando. This is from level 8-2 in the game.
I got one.
All right.
And you tried to get it past me without putting this one on the list, but I am a jerk. And I want to put this, I would put this on the cutting room floor, not because I think it is great, but because this is the song that most people know from Epic Yarn, for better or for worse. I think it's an okay song overall, but Green Greens. The infamous recorder piece.
Yep.
It sure was a choice.
Yes, it was. And you can blame that one on Hal.
That sounds about right. I don't think it's that bad, and obviously I came to associate it with the Super Best Friends, who used it as their main theme for years before the channel shut down. So it's got a very special place in my heart, despite being a song.
It sure is.
Recorders are not fun to listen to.
Oh, man. Yeah, so I had no idea going into the research it was a totally different game. I mean, a lot of the game was going to be very similar, right? But to throw in that Kirby curveball so late in the game, it's pretty crazy. But what will I never forget? I remember playing this game in co-op with my friend Scott White, and we sat down like right when the game came out and just burned through it in 5 hours.
I remember watching that stream.
Yeah, streamed it. So just really good times with that. Like it's a fun game. I don't think I've actually gone back to it since. Not that it's in like knock on the difficulty, whatever, because again, no problem with that. But it was a fun experience just to go through it. And yeah, the magic sock.
Good times. Good times.
Well, I think that'll do it for this week. Definitely good to talk about these two wildly different games.
This is gonna be a heck of a thumbnail. Just Dante next to this cute little...
It sure will be. It's definitely going to be something. So hopefully that caught your eye. But if you liked what you listened to, you can find me on Twitter at Pete Speakeasy. Joe is over at The Dobaga. You can find the video version of original Soundchat over on the YouTube channel Rhymes with Asia and over at rhymeswithasia.com. The podcast version, if you want to take our voices in MP3 format wherever you go, at home, in your car, wherever, in your headphones. That's over on podcast services, of course, on Apple Podcasts, Google Play. But you can also download the MP3 directly at Anonymous Dinosaur over at anondino.squarespace.com. For social media for the show, that's at Soundchat OST. So you can talk to us, leave feedback on the show, recommend game soundtracks that you'd like us to cover. Anything is fair game there. Joe, another good week. Looking forward to more episodes. Certainly, we're planning out future episodes, and there should be some very interesting conversations coming up. So please make sure to subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff. Don't miss what we're doing.
And if you enjoy if you enjoy gaming podcasts, my other podcast, Masterpieces, actually just a few days ago came out with our episode on Castlevania Rondo of Blood. So check that out if you are interested.
Oh yeah, and I'm back doing another gaming podcast. Doing gaming's call and talk radio show, The Power Switch. So if you're big on video game news, rhymeswithasia.com has more information there. But basically, yeah, taking Discord and giving it like a call and talk radio format about games. So good times there. Smash your pieces for you, The Power Switch for me. But to play us out here and to have a cover of a song from Kirby's Epic Yarn, we're going to go with Insane in the Rain Music on YouTube, doing a piano cover of that title screen song. And it's also this level 1-2 in the game, Flower Fields. So for Joe, I'm Peter. We'll see you next time on Original Soundchat. Take care.